very niche subject today. It's about Lightning message channels. If you don't have a clue what they are, don't worry. I will start from the very beginning. But if you have used them before, hopefully you will still get something from this session. Quick introduction, my name is Ellie Matthewman. I'm the lead Salesforce engineer at LendInvest. I've been working in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 13 years. Started when I was about 10. But I have been working with Lightning message channels ever since they were first released. So, what are they? I said I've been talking about them since they were released. They became generally available in summer 20, so they're about 4 years old. And they haven't actually really had many updates since then. They're pretty much as they were then. There's nothing new about them. This is the last time in this talk you'll hear me talking about AI or data cloud. That nothing to do with that. But what they are, the way I like to describe them to someone who has some knowledge about Salesforce is they're a little bit like platform events in that they use a pub-sub model to fire events and subscribe. So you have one component that publishes an event, another component that subscribes to it, and it's passing data. The key difference between Lightning message channels and platform events is that platform events are platform-wide. So they hit the server, they affect everything within the Salesforce server. Lightning message channels are very much only client-side, so they only affect the browser, they only affect things in the DOM that you are using at that point in time. So that's kind of the key difference between platform events and Lightning message channels. If anyone has used the Aura event, it's basically that, but expanded as well. So if you've used Aura, Aura events, it's very similar to that. It uses something called the Lightning message service. So if you've heard of one and the other and getting confused about what they are at all, the way I've started to kind of think of it in my head is Lightning message service is like the rail infrastructure. So it's the infrastructure, the framework that without it, nothing can actually happen. It's the cross-DOM client-side messaging feature that Salesforce have put in place to allow us to use Lightning message channels. Lightning message channels are like the trains that are running along that infrastructure, and then the passengers are the messages that are being sent along those trains or the channels. And the great thing about it is that, unlike the Aura event that I compared it to, it can be used across Visualforce and both kinds of Lightning components, both Aura and LWC, and they're all treated equally. So a Visualforce page can publish an event that a Lightning Web component can subscribe to. An Aura component can publish an event that a Visualforce page can subscribe to. It's completely cross-functional across those three pieces of UI. But that's the key thing here. Lightning message channel is very much about the UI. It's not about your database. So you wouldn't be using it to make any kind of changes to your database. This is purely about creating a more dynamic interface for the user, all on the client side. Hopefully that's given you an idea of what message channel is. Obviously, I'll go more detailed going forward. But the next question is why you should use it. I'm going to reveal all these 3 points because they're all very similar. The main reason you should use it is because it just helps to decouple your components. Instead of having to pass data up and down various components in the DOM and getting it really complex among there, you can just have components talk directly to each other using it. And that means that your components can become much more modular, much more reusable, much more flexible, whilst being more dynamic at the same time. So I think the key thing is here, this bottom point, it enhances your modularity and simplifies the overall architecture. That all sounds great. It's a bit wordy though, so I've got a couple of 2 use cases I'm going to show you. They're very simplified versions of use cases, but hopefully they will drill home the point that I'm making around this. So the first one, I've got a little video. Before I start playing the video, just to prepare you for what you're going to see, we've got 2 Lightning pages. And on the left-hand side, it's a page that's got a component that's completely nested components. And on the right-hand side, we're using Lightning message channel. But they provide the same piece of functionality. So if I just start the video, you can see on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, we hit the Submit tab, we enter a message into the text, hit Submit, it passes it to the Display tab, and it displays that message. However, on the tightly coupled one, we go to the page layout, And we can't do anything with that around moving it around. It's not very kind to your admins. They can't change it to anything. It's just one set component. I've wrapped it in a container. What do we do now? We have to go back to the developer, or the developer has to go back to VS Code. Using the Lightning message channel version, you open the Lightning page and you can actually see that they're two separate components that you can move individually. So if suddenly the end user goes, hang on a minute, I want it in an accordion instead of a tab, an admin can just go in, add your accordion component and move the tabs from one to the other. And then if you've anything like my experience is, they'll go, actually, no, I preferred the tabs. So you have to change it back again. If you were doing it in a nested component, that would then spend time, the developer having to change it to the accordion, through your VS Code, deploying it, etc., and then reverting. Here, it's just as simple as opening up your Lightning page, opening the accordion and move your components. And the functionality then works exactly like it did before. It's just in the accordion instead of the tab. So the thing I didn't say about why you should use it is it's being friendly to your admins as well. It's given them a lot more power to make the pages look exactly how you want them to look, or exactly how the users want them to look. So that's what it looks like on the front end. I'm going to show you a few things on how it looks on the back end, if I can click in the right place and not show the video again. So this is the one using nested components. If any of you have written LWC before, it's a very simple version of it. If you haven't, don't panic. The key thing I'm going to explain here is these are the two kind of nested components that we've got the display tab and the submit tab. And so you're having to use the nested one. We've got an event handler. When someone hits the submit button, it sends an event up. We handle that and essentially turn the message that gets sent us into the text variable, which we then pass back down to the child one. So we're moving up and down to achieve the result, and that's how we're passing the data. However, using Lightning Message Channel, we suddenly don't need to have this parent container that manages the handling of the data up and down. We've now got a publisher component that just publishes the message and then doesn't care about what happens after it's published the message, because it doesn't need to care about what's happened after it's published the message. And then we've got another component that is subscribing to the message, and it doesn't care about where that's coming from. It just needs to know, I've received this message, and now I'm going to handle it. So they're now two separate components that are not intrinsically linked. They are not tightly coupled. They are now independent of each other. We could have multiple different publishing components from different areas publishing messages that this subscribed to. Similarly, we could have multiple components that this is publishing messages that are subscribed to that channel. So you can also do, obviously have multiple components subscribing to the same thing. So that's kind of the comparison from a code point of view. And then just to nail the point home, in case I haven't made it clear yet, here's the nice little diagram I've put together to really try and make it clear. In the example, using nested, we've got the example submit component that pushes data up to the example container component and that back down into the example display. However, using Lightning Message Channel, suddenly we've got the message publisher, publishes it to the Lightning Message service, and then the subscriber subscribes from that service and grabs the data. That's how it kind of works. That's the difference between how you may have been used to doing it if you're used to doing nested components for whatever reason, and this is how you can do it to make it much more modular, much more simplified. I'll go over the code again in a bit. Don't worry about that. I will explain how it works in a bit more detail. The other use case I've got, I'll quickly click the page over to it, is around experience sites. So I don't know if anyone has tried to use platform events in experience sites, but LWCs do not subscribe nicely to platform events in an experience site. There's workarounds you can do, but they, unlike in the normal Salesforce where you can, it doesn't. The good news is Lightning Message Channels work perfectly fine in experience sites. So this use case I've got, again, it's similar to one that we've actually used, just a much more simplified version. And I'll run the video in a minute. But basically, we've got the page component and we've got a header component. And the header component is completely separate from the page component. But when the page component loads, it will send the data to the header to say, this is what the page is called and what the breadcrumbs is called, so that the header will dynamically update as we move along the pages. This one, I'm just going to quickly show a video just to show it in real detail again. If it loads up, here we go. So again, we're on the home page. We've got the home breadcrumb. We click on the cases page. The header updates to cases with the new breadcrumb. Go to the opportunities page. We've got the opportunities header now. But they're completely separated components. They've just received that data because the LWC on the page has published it and the header is subscribed to it. So it's just another example of how they've been separated out. Hopefully now you have a good understanding of what they are, why they are, so now you want to know how to use them. If you haven't used them before, the first key thing you have to learn is you actually have to create the Lightning message channel to be able to publish and subscribe to that message channel. And if you go into Salesforce Setup to try and create one, you will not find it. They are completely invisible in the Salesforce Setup. They're just not there. They don't exist. You can kind of understand why. They're purely client-side. There's nothing server-side on them, and it is kind of only developers that ever will be actually using them. So maybe it does make sense. But at the same time, if there's a release manager or admins that are releasing them, they kind of sometimes might get curious and want to know what they are, and you can only view them via the metadata API. In my case, I'm using VS Code to create it, etc. The other key thing before I show you how to create it is, as things stand, if anyone uses the Salesforce extensions and the command palette, which I often do, there's a nice little button that you can just do to create an Apex class, and it'll create the XML file for you as well and all that, and it's really cool. None of that for this. This is completely manual. When I did this talk a couple of weeks ago, suddenly Todd was like, oh, someone should do that as an open source project to improve the command palette. So if anyone wants a project, there you go. But at the moment, it is completely manual, so you do need to be careful when creating it. First of all, we need to create the message channel folder. So you need to go to the default tab, or whichever folder you're using if you're not using the default. But in my case, I'm going to use the default folder and create something called message channels, spelled exactly like that, capitalized like that. Then to create the channel itself, this is the name of the channel, example message. Then you follow it with a dot, and then it's message channel-meta.xml. So it needs to be that exact naming after the dot. Otherwise, when you try to deploy it, Salesforce will go, I don't know what you're talking about. You'll then see I posted some code in there. I've got that on the next slide, and I will go over it in detail. But that's how you actually physically create the piece of metadata using VS Code. So that XML that I then typed into it, here's it in a format that you can actually read much better, hopefully. And I'll quickly go over what all this means. At the top, we've got your standard thing saying it's an XML file, and this is the encoding that we're using it. The next bit, we've got the wrapper for the Lightning message channel with the place where Salesforce now knows what that definition is by using that definition. So that's your Lightning message channel. We've then got the master label. The master label is really just for internal use. That name that we gave the file, we'll be reusing that later, but this label is really just for the person who's viewing it on VS Code, which just makes it even more confusing because it would be nice to have it displayed in Salesforce. That's a different story. But yeah, so we've got master label is the label for it. Is exposed is true, because if it's not exposed, you can't use it. A description, it's not mandatory, but if you're a good Salesforce person, you always fill in your descriptions. I think this is even more important to do for Lightning message channels because a year down the line, someone might want to use this message channel, and if it's not documented exactly what it's being used for, someone might do a subscription to it or publish a message on it that doesn't quite fit, and then suddenly everything breaks because it's not publishing correctly, etc. So it is really important to me that you document using the description what the point of this message channel is. You don't actually have to include any of these fields in it. It can just be an event. It might be that a button was clicked. It might just literally be an event that the button was clicked. Someone else subscribed. They know the button was clicked. It's done. Just because it's on that Lightning message channel, we'll know that was the event and we can process it. However, you can send data with it as well. So that's what these Lightning message fields are all about. That's where we're defining the fields that we're sending along with it. So we've got the Lightning message field tags, then we've got a field name, record ID, so when you're publishing the payload for it, that's the name of the field that you'll use, and then again, a description. And again, I would recommend you document your description because one thing you may or may not notice is that we don't actually define a data type here. So you could literally pass it as a string, an integer, etc. There are certain restrictions. You can't pass functions, etc. through Lightning message channels, but it could be a number, a Boolean, it could be various things. So make sure you document kind of what we're expecting to be sent in there so that it can be used later by someone else without having to go through it. So here we've got record ID, the record ID that changed, and record data. And that is your Lightning message channel created. But that is just the train. That doesn't actually mean that we'll actually get the train running and actually be sending any messages. This is just the channel we'll use to send the message. So the next thing we need to do is know how to publish it. In this session, I am just going to show you LWC, how you publish and subscribe it. But like I said at the start, you can use Visualforce, you can use Aura. At the end, there'll be links that have got detailed descriptions around how you can do it in Visualforce or Aura. For now, I'm concentrating on LWC, because you should, right? So first of all, we've got publishing a message, and this is actually really easy. You need to import some things. So first, you need to import from the Lightning message service, the publish method, and then the message context. I won't go into too much detail about the message context, but it's kind of a wrapper, I guess, is the best way to say, that it will wrap around your message so that the Salesforce event bus knows the right way to deal with it. So you just need to make sure you include it. And then the other thing you need to do is import the actual channel. And this is where the name of that file matters, because this is what this first part of this import is internal example. And then you always have to include your __C, because it is a custom Lightning message channel. I'm not aware of any standard ones we can use in LWC, but it does help to prevent any naming things if they do introduce them, etc. So you need to remember the __C, and it's the file name, not the master label. So that's your imports. Then when you're actually in your LWC, all you need to do with the message context is just wire it in. There are other ways you could bring it in, but this is kind of the most expected way for you to do it. And by doing it this way, you're guaranteed the best use of it. And then the way that I'm publishing my message is someone clicks a button and that will publish the message. So the first thing is I'm creating the payload. So I'm creating the message where the text equals the text value that they've submitted in the input text. And then we're just publishing it. Using the publish method, we have to include this message context that we've wired in. We're calling the name of the channel that we've defined when we imported it up here, and then the message, which is here. And that is all you need to do to publish the message on the message channel. It's done. I've just wrapped it in a try-catch because, force of habit. But yeah, that's how you publish the message. That's actually really easy. Where things can get a little bit more complicated is subscribing and unsubscribing. There's a few more imports you need to do. So obviously, if you're unsubscribing as well, you need to import both subscribe and unsubscribe. Again, you need to include the message context. There's also something called application scope. I've got another slide where I will talk about scope in a little bit more detail. You do not need to include the application scope, but it opens up some areas if you do include it. I'll talk about that in a slide coming up. But you basically import these from the message service again, import the channel again, and then the best practice is to do it in connected callbacks. There are reasons you might want to subscribe at a different point in time, but connected callback is it's the earliest you can actually do it in the lifecycle hooks. You can't subscribe, until it's been loaded in the DOM. So that's the earliest that you can actually subscribe to it. And similarly, I've done that, but those are just methods. So what do those methods look like? So first of all, we've got a variable just called subscription that we're assigning the subscribe method. And we're just passing in again the message context, the channel, the message that's been received, and then we're handling that message. And in this example, I have included application scope. And then the handle message could be anything. That's just another JavaScript method in your LWC. It could be however you want that message handled, right? So I haven't shown what it is there, but literally it could be display the text back. It could be send another message. It could be whatever you want it to be that you can do in your JavaScript. And then just at the bottom, we've got the unsubscribe. It's as simple as calling unsubscribe and this subscription. Just a little bit about application scope. So components, Visualforce, Aura, or LWC can all publish and subscribe or subscribe to events as long as they've been loaded into the DOM is the first point. So in my example I gave earlier, you may not have noticed, but I was cheeky and I had the display tab show up first and you had to physically click on the submit tab. And that was so that display tab had a chance to have that connected callback run and subscribe to the message channel so that when I hit the publish on the submit tab, it would actually be subscribed. If it hasn't been loaded into the DOM, it will not be able to subscribe and it won't receive the message. So just be aware of that. Without using application scope, these are all the things that you will subscribe to it naturally. But if you use application scope, you get these additional things. So some of the things you can use are console tabs, console subtabs, even utility bar items can subscribe and publish them. So you could have a utility bar item that publishes an event that is on the Lightning Web Component on the contact page. So that's a little bit about scope messaging. Some caveats, it is within your single browser. So if you've got something on your browser and your friend's got something else, an event published on your browser is not going to be received by your friend's browser. It is within your own browser, but like I said, it does support for console tabs. Do make sure you handle subscription and non-subscription correctly. This is where that documentation comes in, to make sure you're getting things behaving the way you would expect them to behave. And just be careful about sensitive data that you might submit through it, just to be safe around that, so do consider that. The last thing I've got is a link. So this is one link, and feel free to use it. There are a ton of resources on that link. I've got links to blogs, I've got links to GitHub repos, including the LWC recipes, which gives you how to do it on Visualforce, Aura, and LWCs. It's got links to videos. So however you like to learn, there'll be something on there that you can use. The other thing that I've done quite simple use cases today. In there's a link to a LinkedIn profile for someone called Ariana. She's not here today, but she was at the talk I did a couple of weeks ago, and she's got an amazingly complex use case for Lightning Message channels. So if you are interested in that, do reach out to her and she will talk about it. It was too complex for me to do today. But it is there. I think, how much time have I got left? 3 minutes, so I can take some questions if anyone does have any questions, but don't have too many questions. Go on.
Does this also work for, like, you have explained custom component to custom component, but does it also work with standard component and custom component?
So in a standard component, you wouldn't be able to do the publish or subscribe within the code, so you can't do it in a standard component, no. So it'd have to be custom components. Just for people who couldn't hear online, the question was whether you could do it from a standard or to a standard component. And no, you can't, unfortunately. Yes?
Is there a way to mitigate the risk, data sensitivity risk, by restricting which components can subscribe to the event channel, or is this completely free for all?
I mean, it's up to you to say to subscribe to it. So...
Right, but I'm talking about malicious components being inserted into pages go and say, I would like to listen to this, or can my event channel side restrict and say only component X, Y, and AP?
Gotcha. Just for the sake of people who couldn't hear that, I'm going to repeat it. Is there a way to restrict components that can receive it in case of someone trying to insert a malicious component? Is that understood? I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, I actually don't know the answer. I don't think there is a way. If I find out differently, I will post something on the Hoover app in the chat so people know. I don't think there is a way, but don't quote me on that. Unless anyone else in the room knows the answer. Okay. Any more questions? Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry.
No worries. Was the subscribe function that you showed, is the format of that just a standard format? So it looked like it expected a few parameters and then a function of what to do with the message. Is that just the standard documentation?
So just for the sake, she was asking about the formatting of the subscribe method. There are some required parameters, but not everything I showed there was required. So for the application scope was not required. But I believe everything else is, as far as I know. But don't quote again. I'm now doubting myself. I'm probably right, because whenever I doubt myself, I am right. But I'm fairly sure the first three are, but the scope isn't. Anything? Oh, yep, one more up the back.
It's sort of two questions in one.
Oh, no.
So if we've got a managed package, is there a way that we could subscribe to events that may be emitting, and B, if it is emitting them, is there any way of discovering those?
So it does work across namespaces, but if it's in a managed package, if you don't, you might not know it exists. So if you know it exists, you can subscribe to it if it's documented, because it does work across namespaces. But the problem is knowing that it exists, because if it's a managed package, they're often hidden. So if they've got documentation that says, yes, we've got this message channel you can use, you should be able to use it. But
My colleague was also wanting to know how important unsubscribing is.
so this is an interesting question, because when I gave this talk 3 weeks ago, I thought it was really important. This is the last question, I've just been warned. I was told it's really important, but actually, as long as you're wiring in that message context, it should be able to unsubscribe by itself, so you don't necessarily need to unsubscribe. And I learned that myself in the last week as well. I told everyone, make sure you unsubscribe, and actually, it's not 100% necessary. But thank you very much, everyone.